It was supposed to be a simple decision. One made on impulse, but it set in motion a series of events no one could have predicted. Sarah had spent weeks planning the perfect birthday dinner for her mother-in-law, Sheila. The menu was set, the invitations were sent, and the table was going to look like something out of a magazine. It was supposed to be a night to celebrate Sheila, a woman Sarah had long found difficult to connect with. The tension had been building for months, and this dinner felt like the last straw. Sarah had never truly gotten along with Sheila. From the moment she married Tom, Sheila had been a constant presence in her life, whether she liked it or not. At first, Sarah had tried to be the dutiful daughter-in-law, smiling through every comment, every look of disapproval. She tried to swallow her feelings, to please the woman who had given birth to the man she loved. But over time, the cracks began to show. Sheila's unsolicited advice about Sarah's parenting, her constant comparisons between Sarah and her late wife, Tom's first wife, had slowly worn her down. Every family gathering felt like a test of endurance. Sheila never outright criticized Sarah. She was too subtle for that. Instead, it was the passive-aggressive remarks that made Sarah feel like she was never good enough. The little digs about how Sarah's cooking wasn't as good as Tom's mother's, or how her way of raising their kids didn't quite match up to her expectations. Sheila would casually mention how she'd always been there for Tom in a way that no one else could. The constant reminder that she was the first woman to ever truly understand him. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone, the undertone that always left Sarah feeling small and unimportant. Despite Sarah's best efforts, the relationship had never improved. Every time she tried to reach out, every time she made a gesture of goodwill, Sheila would turn it into a silent game of one-upmanship. Sheila would graciously accept a gift, but then compare it to the more expensive gift Tom's first wife had once given her. Or worse, she'd turn every conversation into a subtle reminder of how much better things were before Sarah came into the picture. Sheila's gaze would linger just a moment too long when talking about the good old days, the days when Tom was still happy. And yet, Tom never saw it. He loved his mother deeply, and to him, Sheila was perfect. A saint. She could do no wrong. In Tom's eyes, Sarah was always the one who was too sensitive, too eager to find fault. Even when Sheila's behavior crossed a line, Tom would brush it off as harmless or, worse, blame Sarah for overreacting. This never failed to frustrate Sarah, but she held her tongue. She had tried so hard to fit in, to be the good daughter-in-law. But it had become exhausting. That's when Sarah decided that she was done. She had spent months planning the perfect dinner, hoping that this time she could make things right, show Sheila how much she cared. But the reality was, no matter how hard she tried, things never changed. Sarah had put her heart into the planning, the decorations, the menu, everything. But when the day before the dinner came, she found herself standing in the kitchen, staring at the invitations she had so carefully crafted, the weight of resentment suddenly sinking in. Her mind raced as she thought about the years of biting her tongue, about the subtle criticisms, the hurtful comments. She thought about how Tom never saw it, never understood why she felt the way she did. She thought about how she could never truly measure up in Sheila's eyes, no matter how much she tried. In that moment, a thought came to Sarah, one that felt almost like a whisper in her head: what if I cancelled? It wasn't a rational thought. There was too much time and effort already invested in this dinner. Everything was already in place, and the food had been prepared. But in the quiet of the kitchen, as Sarah stared at the invitation cards, she realized that she was tired. Tired of trying. Tired of pretending that everything was fine. It felt like the perfect way to take control of a situation that had always made her feel powerless. What would happen if she just pulled the plug? She wondered how Sheila would react, how Tom would react. She thought about the satisfaction it might bring her to show Sheila that she was not the one in control anymore. Sarah hesitated for a moment, but then, almost without thinking, she grabbed her phone. She didn't even know what she was going to say at first, but the words came out before she could stop them. "I'm sorry, but I have to cancel tomorrow's dinner. Something has come up." As soon as she pressed send, she felt a rush of relief. It was over. There would be no dinner, no awkward forced smiles, no need to pretend everything was okay. The decision felt liberating in a way Sarah hadn't expected. For the first time in months, she felt like she had done something for herself, something that was for her and not for anyone else. She sighed, a weight lifting from her chest. This was it. She had made her stand. But just as quickly as that feeling of liberation settled in, a new sense of unease washed over her. What had she done? What would Tom think? What would Sheila think? A tiny voice in the back of her mind whispered that she might have gone too far. Moments later, the phone buzzed. It was a message from Tom. "Sarah, why did you cancel the dinner? Sheila is really upset. This isn't like you. Why did you do this?" Sarah stared at the screen, her fingers frozen above the keyboard. She hadn't anticipated this. Tom's message wasn't just a simple inquiry, it was laced with confusion and disappointment. The words seemed to hang in the air, each one making Sarah feel smaller, more isolated. She didn't know how to respond. How could she explain that she was finally standing up for herself? That she was tired of being treated as less than, tired of being overlooked and belittled? She didn't reply immediately. Instead, she sat down at the kitchen table, her heart racing. Her phone screen flashed again. Another message from Tom. "I don't understand. I thought you wanted to make things work with Mom. What happened?" The weight of his words settled heavily on her chest. This wasn't just about dinner anymore. This was about everything, her relationship with Sheila, her relationship with Tom, and the cracks in her marriage that had started to appear over the years. She knew that canceling the dinner wasn't going to solve anything, but it had felt like the only option at the time. Sarah's mind was swirling with thoughts, none of them comforting. She had made a choice, but now it was out there, and there was no taking it back. The rest of the night passed in a haze. Tom was distant, barely speaking. There were no more messages, no more calls. Sarah went to bed feeling a strange mixture of guilt and relief, unsure of what the next day would bring. The morning came, and the phone buzzed again. This time, it was a package left at her front door. Sarah's curiosity piqued. She didn't remember ordering anything, and when she bent down to pick it up, her heart skipped a beat. It was addressed to her in Sheila's unmistakable handwriting. When she opened the package, there was nothing inside but a single, folded letter. Sarah's fingers trembled as she unfolded it, her eyes scanning the words. "You'll regret this, Sarah. You've crossed a line." A cold shiver ran down her spine. She stared at the letter, trying to make sense of what it meant. Was this some kind of sick joke? Or was it something more? She knew that Sheila had always been difficult, but this felt different. There was a strange finality in the words, something ominous that made Sarah's skin crawl. And in that moment, she realized with a sickening clarity that what she thought was just a simple cancellation was about to spiral into something far darker. Something that would test her strength, her marriage, and everything she thought she knew about her family. As Sarah stood there, staring at the letter, she felt a creeping dread wash over her. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The storm was only just starting, and there was no telling what it would bring. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The letter from Sheila had left a gnawing pit in her stomach. She stared at the folded piece of paper in her hands, the words still echoing in her mind. "You've crossed a line." What line? What had she really done? She had only cancelled a dinner that, if she were honest with herself, she hadn't wanted to host in the first place. Yet, something about Sheila's words sent a ripple of unease through Sarah's mind. The sun was barely up, and the morning light streamed through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the floor. Sarah sat alone at the table, her fingers still trembling from the letter. She didn't want to be a victim of her own decisions, but there was no escaping the feeling that she was spiraling deeper into a mess she couldn't control. What had started as a simple act of defiance had now evolved into something far darker, far more sinister. As Sarah sat there, contemplating what to do next, her phone buzzed once again. It was from Tom, but this time, his message felt different, more urgent, almost desperate. "Sarah, we need to talk. Please." The words hit Sarah like a ton of bricks. She had expected to hear from him, but not like this. She had hoped that maybe, just maybe, things would calm down after the initial shock of the cancelled dinner. But instead, the storm was only intensifying. Tom's message felt like an indictment of her actions, a silent accusation that made Sarah's chest tighten. The love she had once felt for him seemed distant, clouded by years of frustration and unresolved tension. She had longed to feel supported by him, to feel like he was on her side, but every time Sheila's shadow loomed over them, Tom always sided with his mother. It wasn't malicious, it was just the way things had always been. Sarah tried to ignore the rising anxiety in her chest as she stared at the message. She had made her decision. She had cancelled the dinner for her own sanity, but now, it seemed like everything she feared was coming to fruition. Sheila's vengeance would be swift, and Sarah wasn't sure if she was ready to face it. With a sigh, Sarah picked up the phone and dialed Tom's number. The phone rang for a long time before he finally picked up. "Sarah, we need to talk." Tom's voice was strained, the words hanging heavy between them. "I know," she said quietly, feeling the weight of the conversation ahead. "I saw your message. Where are you?" "I'm coming home now. I need to see you. This isn't like you." "What happened?" Tom's voice cracked slightly as he spoke, and Sarah felt a surge of guilt wash over her. She didn't want to hurt him, but she also knew that she couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. "I'll be here," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom hung up, and Sarah stood in the kitchen, her mind racing. What was she going to say? What could she say? Sheila's letter was a chilling reminder of the power she held over Sarah's life. But the bigger question lingered in Sarah's mind: what was Sheila really capable of? Was it just a warning, or was this the beginning of something much worse? The next few hours felt like an eternity. Sarah moved through the motions of the day, distracted and unsettled. She hadn't prepared herself for the emotional battle that lay ahead. Tom had always been the one to smooth things over with Sheila, to make everything seem okay, even when it wasn't. But now, with the events of the night before, things had crossed a line. Sarah could feel it deep in her gut. Finally, the door opened, and Tom stepped inside. He looked tired, his face etched with concern. Sarah's heart tightened at the sight of him. She had married him with the hope that they would build a life together, but now, everything felt uncertain. He didn't say anything at first. He just walked over to her and placed his hands on her shoulders. Sarah could feel the tension in his touch, the weight of unspoken words. "I don't understand," Tom finally said, his voice low and strained. "Why did you cancel the dinner, Sarah? Why now?" Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. This was it, the moment she had been dreading. The moment of reckoning. She could feel the pressure building in her chest. How could she explain to Tom that she was exhausted? That Sheila's constant presence in their lives, her subtle undermining, had worn her down to the point of breaking? "I couldn't do it anymore, Tom," she said, her voice trembling. "I couldn't pretend to be something I'm not. I'm tired of trying to please her. No matter what I do, it's never enough. She never respects me. She never gives me a chance." Tom's expression faltered, a flicker of hurt crossing his face. "She's my mother, Sarah. She's the one who raised me. She's always going to be part of our lives." "I know," Sarah replied, the tears threatening to fall. But she's never been part of my life. I feel like I'm constantly walking on eggshells around her, like nothing I do is ever right. It's too much, Tom. Tom didn't respond immediately. He just stood there, staring at her with a mix of confusion and concern. Sarah could see the internal conflict in his eyes. He was torn between his loyalty to his mother and his love for her. She knew it wasn't easy for him, but it had become unbearable for her. Every family gathering, every dinner, every holiday, it always felt like Sheila was the third wheel in their marriage, a constant reminder that Sarah was never truly welcome. I didn't want to hurt you, Sarah added quietly. I didn't want to disappoint you. But I couldn't go through with it. Not after everything. Tom's eyes softened for a moment, but the silence between them was deafening. He sat down on the couch, running his hands through his hair in frustration. I don't know what to say, Sarah, he admitted, his voice tight. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know either, she replied, the tears finally spilling over. I just don't know. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The tension in the room was thick, palpable. Sarah felt like she was suffocating under the weight of it all. She didn't want to fight with Tom, but it was clear that the cracks in their relationship were starting to show. Sheila's influence had always been a silent, lurking presence in their lives, but now it was becoming impossible to ignore. Just as Sarah was about to speak again, her phone buzzed once more. It was a message from Sheila. I know what you did, Sarah. You can't hide from me. This isn't over. The words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. She dropped the phone on the table, her hands shaking. Tom glanced at her, his face hardening. What is it? Sarah didn't say anything at first. She couldn't. The letter had been bad enough, but this message, it felt like something more. Sheila wasn't just angry. She was planning something. Something that made Sarah's blood run cold. I think this is just the beginning, Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. As the day stretched on, the atmosphere in the house grew more tense. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Sheila was watching, waiting, ready to make her next move. Every phone call, every knock on the door, every text message made her jump. The sense of dread was growing, and Sarah had no idea what was coming next. That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she couldn't escape the nagging feeling that she had made a terrible mistake. What had she done? By canceling the dinner, she had opened a door to something much darker than she had ever imagined. And Sheila wasn't the kind of woman to let things go quietly. Tom lay beside her, his back turned. He was awake, too, but neither of them spoke. The silence between them had become suffocating. As Sarah closed her eyes, the weight of everything she had set in motion settled over her. There was no going back now. And just as she drifted off to sleep, a single thought echoed in her mind. Sheila's revenge had only just begun. The next morning, Sarah woke up to a sense of suffocating dread. It was as though the air had thickened around her, and every movement, every thought, felt weighted. Her eyes darted to the empty side of the bed. Tom had gotten up early. She had no idea what time it was, but she could already feel the tension in the house. Tom had barely spoken to her last night. The space between them seemed to stretch wider with every passing second. His silence felt louder than any argument they had ever had, and Sarah wasn't sure how to fix it. She wanted to reach out to him, to explain why she had cancelled the dinner, but deep down, she knew that wasn't going to change anything. The damage had already been done. Sheila's words haunted her thoughts, and the weight of her defiance was beginning to feel heavier than she had anticipated. After a few minutes of lying in bed, Sarah forced herself to get up. She walked into the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. The coldness didn't bring clarity, it only made her feel more disoriented. As she looked at her reflection in the mirror, she saw a woman who had once been full of hope and optimism, but now she was barely holding it together. She had wanted to take control, but now that she had, it felt like she was losing everything. Her marriage, her peace of mind, and the safety she had once felt in her own home, all of it seemed to be slipping through her fingers. She walked into the kitchen, hoping that the routine of making coffee would ground her. But even the familiar sounds, the hiss of the coffee machine, the smell of brewing coffee, felt alien today. Sarah poured herself a cup and sat down at the table, her mind swirling. Her phone buzzed. It was another message from Sheila. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. "I'm coming over to pick up some things. Don't try to stop me." The words were simple, but they carried an unmistakable weight of authority. Sheila wasn't asking, she was demanding. Sarah's palms began to sweat as she stared at the message. What was this about? Sheila wasn't the type to come over uninvited, especially not after what had happened. Was she trying to escalate things? Was this the beginning of her revenge? Sarah's mind raced as she contemplated the possibilities. Sheila was unpredictable. One moment, she would be passive-aggressive, and the next, she would strike without warning. And Sarah had no idea what this visit meant. She grabbed her phone and quickly sent a reply. "What do you need? We can talk." There was no response immediately. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she anxiously waited for a reply. She thought she could hear every tick of the clock on the wall, the seconds stretching into what felt like hours. Finally, Sheila's response came. "I'm not here to talk, Sarah. I'm here to take what's mine. You'll see." The message sent a chill down Sarah's spine. This wasn't just about dinner anymore. This was something much bigger. Sheila wasn't just angry about the cancelled dinner, she was making a move, and Sarah had no idea what that move would be. Tom came downstairs a short while later. He was dressed for work, but he looked like he hadn't slept a wink. His face was drawn, his eyes tired and distant. Sarah didn't know whether to confront him about the message or wait for him to bring it up first. But as soon as he saw her sitting at the kitchen table, his expression hardened. "I need to talk to you, Sarah," Tom said, his voice thick with tension. Sarah looked at him, her heart aching. "I know. I saw the message from Sheila." Tom's face flushed with anger. "What did you do, Sarah? This isn't just about the dinner. You've made things worse. She's upset, and now I have to deal with her, but you," he paused, taking a deep breath. "You need to understand that I'm stuck in the middle of this. You can't just cancel everything and expect it to be okay." "I didn't want this, Tom," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't pretend anymore. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep bending to her will and pretending that everything's fine when it's not." Tom's face softened for a brief moment, but then the hardness returned. "But you have to realize, Sheila is my mother. She's not going to let this go easily. And now it's about more than just the dinner. I need to fix this, Sarah. I need you to help me fix this." Sarah's heart sank. How could she help him fix something that she had no control over? Sheila had always been the dominant force in their family, and no matter what Sarah did, it would never be enough. She would always be the outsider, the interloper who had come in and disrupted the perfect little world Sheila had built. Sarah had never been able to win. "I can't fix this, Tom," Sarah whispered. "This is bigger than just us." Before Tom could say anything else, Sarah's phone buzzed again. She quickly grabbed it, her heart racing. The message from Sheila was there. "I'm on my way. Don't try to stop me." Tom's expression grew more concerned. "What is this about, Sarah?" "I don't know," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "But she's coming over. And I don't know what she's planning." "Maybe we should leave," Tom suggested, his voice low. "Maybe we can just get away for a bit." Sarah looked at him, disbelief written across her face. "Leave? Run away from her? You're asking me to run from your mother? The words slipped out before she could stop them. She could see the hurt in Tom's eyes, but there was no turning back now. The rift between them was deepening, and Sarah felt more alone than ever. I'm not asking you to run, Sarah, Tom said softly, I just don't know how to handle this. I can't lose you, too. The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could fix this. But as quickly as it came, that hope was crushed under the weight of the reality before her. Sheila was coming. And nothing would stop her. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She looked at Tom, but he was already walking toward the door, his shoulders heavy with the burden of his family's drama. Stay here, Tom said, his voice low. I'll handle this. Sarah wanted to protest, to tell him that she couldn't just stand by while Sheila barged into their home, but the words died in her throat. She knew there was nothing she could say that would change things. Tom was going to try to make peace with his mother, just like he always did. He was going to try to fix everything, and in doing so, he would alienate her even more. Sheila would get what she wanted. Again. The door opened, and Sarah heard Tom's voice, but it was too soft to make out what he was saying. There was a pause. Then, a sharp voice cut through the silence. Where's Sarah? Sheila's voice was cold, demanding. Sarah could feel the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Sarah stood up, her legs shaking. She wasn't sure what she expected, but she knew that Sheila wasn't here to make peace. Whatever was about to unfold, it wasn't going to be good. Before she could gather her thoughts, Sheila stepped into the room. The air in the house seemed to grow colder. She was calm, eerily so, but there was something about the way she looked at Sarah, something unsettling in her gaze, that made Sarah's blood run cold. She's here, Sheila said, her voice almost too calm. And I'm not leaving until we have a conversation. Sarah felt the walls close in around her. There was no running. No hiding. Sheila had come, and she wasn't leaving until she got exactly what she wanted. I don't know what you think you're going to accomplish here, Sheila, Sarah said, her voice trembling but defiant. You've made your point. But you're not going to control me anymore. Sheila smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was a smile that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. Oh, Sarah. You think you're in control? You have no idea what you've started. This is just the beginning. The tension in the room was unbearable. Every word Sheila spoke felt like a threat, and Sarah couldn't escape the feeling that she was about to lose everything. But what could Sarah do? How could she stop a woman like Sheila, someone who had always had the power to manipulate and control? The battle between them wasn't just about the dinner anymore, it was a fight for Sarah's very place in the family. And in that moment, she realized that there was no winning this battle. Not unless she fought back in ways she hadn't even begun to imagine. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sheila stood in the doorway, her gaze fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made Sarah feel small. Her mother-in-law's presence, which had always been suffocating, now felt downright oppressive. Sarah could barely breathe, her heart pounding as she tried to steady her nerves. This was it, the moment she had been dreading. Sheila wasn't just angry about the cancelled dinner anymore. She was here for something much deeper. Sarah could feel it. Something was going to break. Tom was still standing by the door, caught between Sarah and Sheila, his body tense, his eyes darting nervously between them. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, but neither woman moved. It was as though a standoff had begun, and Sarah wasn't sure who would make the first move. Sheila had always been able to manipulate Tom, but Sarah had reached her breaking point. She wasn't going to let Sheila control her anymore. Not today. Sheila, Sarah finally spoke, her voice shaking but resolute. What do you want? You've made your point. You've made me feel like I don't belong in this family, and I've had enough of it. Sheila's smile widened, but it wasn't warm or comforting. It was cold, calculated. Oh, Sarah, you think you know everything. You think you've got it all figured out. But you don't. You've crossed a line that you'll never be able to uncross. You've made your decision, but it's not just about you anymore. It's about all of us. And trust me, you'll regret this. Sarah's stomach twisted with unease. But she stood her ground. You've always tried to control everything, Sheila. My relationship with Tom, the way I raise my kids, even how I cook dinner. I'm done with that. I'm done pretending to be someone I'm not. I've been nothing but respectful to you, but you've made it impossible for me to keep doing this. You don't get to control me anymore. Sheila's eyes narrowed, and the smile dropped from her face. You think you've been respectful? You think I've tried to control you? You've always been the problem, Sarah. You've always been the one standing in the way of me and my son. You think Tom doesn't see it? You think he doesn't know? Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She could feel Tom's eyes on her, but he said nothing. He just stood there, his face tense, his jaw clenched. He wasn't coming to her defense. She had known that he was always torn between the two women in his life, but this was different. He wasn't taking sides, not in front of Sheila. The realization hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. She was alone in this fight. I've spent years trying to be a good wife, trying to fit into your perfect little family, Sarah said, her voice trembling with anger and frustration. But you've never let me in. You've never made me feel welcome. You've always compared me to her, the one who came before me. It's like I don't even exist in your eyes. Sheila crossed her arms over her chest, her expression unmoving. You're right. You don't exist in my eyes, Sarah. And that's the problem. You've tried to replace someone who can never be replaced. And you've failed. Miserably. Sarah's hands balled into fists. The hurtful word stung, but she wasn't going to let Sheila see her break. I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm just trying to live my life. But you've made that impossible. And now, you're here, using your power to destroy everything we've built. There was a long silence, and Sarah felt the weight of her words hanging in the air. For a brief moment, it seemed like Sheila was considering something, but then she spoke again, her voice dripping with venom. You really think you can win this fight, don't you? You think you can stand up to me and come out on top. But you don't know the first thing about me, Sarah. You've underestimated me your entire life. And that will be your downfall. Sarah swallowed hard, trying to push down the rising panic in her chest. She couldn't let Sheila win. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. You've already done enough damage. You've made Tom question me, made him doubt me. But I won't let you tear our family apart. I won't let you destroy everything I've worked for. At that, Sheila finally stepped closer. Her gaze was icy, calculating. You think you're going to stop me? You're nothing more than a pawn in a game that's been going on long before you even entered the picture. And you'll never win, Sarah. Not with me in the way. Tom finally spoke, his voice tight with tension. Mom, stop it. This isn't helping anyone. Sarah, can we just... No, Tom, Sarah interrupted, her voice rising. No more pretending. This is your mother's game. It always has been. You're so blinded by her that you don't see how she's destroying everything around us. How long are you going to let her control you? Tom's face flushed with anger, but Sarah could see the hurt behind his eyes. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to defend himself. And in that moment, Sarah realized that he was as much a victim as she was. Sheila had always held power over him, and now that power was tearing them apart. You're right, Tom said quietly, his voice strained. I've let her control me for too long. But I don't know how to fix this, Sarah. I don't know how to make it right. Sheila's eyes flared with fury. You don't get to speak to her like that, Tom. You don't get to question me. You owe me your loyalty. Tom's hands clenched into fists, and Sarah could see the conflict in his eyes. He was torn, but Sarah knew that he was finally beginning to see things for what they were. The years of manipulation and control were coming to light, and it was overwhelming for him to process. I can't do this anymore, Tom said, his voice raw. I can't keep living in the middle of this. I can't keep choosing sides between you two. Then choose me, Tom, Sarah said, her voice trembling. Choose our family. Choose us. There was a long pause, and for a moment, it seemed like time had stopped. The silence in the room was deafening, and Sarah held her breath, hoping that Tom would make the choice she had been waiting for. The choice that would mean everything. But instead, Tom's gaze dropped to the floor, and he took a step back. I can't, he whispered, his voice breaking. I can't choose between you and my mother. Sarah's heart shattered into a million pieces. She had fought so hard for this family, for their future together, but now she realized that she was losing everything. Sheila had won. She had always won. You're making a mistake, Tom, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. You're letting her control everything. And you're losing me. The words hung in the air like a heavy weight, and Sarah felt the pain of rejection course through her veins. Sheila's smile returned, a twisted expression of triumph. You see, Sarah? You can't fight me. You'll never win. Sarah didn't know what to say anymore. She had fought for so long, tried so hard to make things work, but it was clear that the battle was over. Sheila had won, and Tom had chosen his mother. Sarah felt completely and utterly alone. But just as she turned to leave, Sheila spoke again, her voice colder than ever. You think this is the end, don't you? But it's just the beginning, Sarah. You've made a mistake that you'll regret for the rest of your life. I will never let you go. The days after. The confrontation with Sheila felt like a blur. Time seemed to stretch and warp as Sarah moved through her life like a ghost, barely existing in a world that had once felt safe and familiar. The house, which had once been a sanctuary, now felt cold and empty. Tom was distant, withdrawn into himself, and Sarah's heart ached with every moment of silence between them. It felt like they were no longer a family but just two people sharing the same space, two people who had drifted so far apart that they couldn't find their way back. Sarah had expected the fallout from the cancelled dinner. She had braced herself for Sheila's wrath. But what she hadn't anticipated was the impact on her marriage. Tom's indecision, his inability to choose between her and his mother, had left her feeling more alone than ever. Every day, the distance between them grew wider, until it felt like there was no way to bridge the gap. She had never imagined that a simple decision to cancel a dinner could unravel everything she had worked so hard for. The days turned into weeks, and Sarah tried to hold on to the fragments of her marriage. She tried to reach out to Tom, to talk about what had happened, but every attempt felt like it hit a brick wall. Tom would listen, but he wouldn't engage. His eyes would cloud over with confusion and guilt, and he would retreat into himself. It was like he had built an impenetrable wall between them, a wall that Sarah couldn't tear down, no matter how hard she tried. One afternoon, Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm tea, staring blankly out the window. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the yard, but Sarah couldn't find any comfort in the beauty of the moment. Her mind was consumed by the unresolved tension, the gnawing feeling that she was losing everything. Her marriage, her sense of self, even her place in the family, everything felt like it was slipping through her fingers. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her reverie. It was a message from Tom. I need to talk to you. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't heard from him in days, not since their last argument. His words were simple, but there was something in them that sent a ripple of hope through her. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment they could finally talk, really talk, about everything. About Sheila, about their marriage, about the chasm that had opened between them. She quickly typed back. Where? When? The reply came almost immediately. I'm at the park. I'll be waiting. When Sarah arrived at the park, she found Tom sitting on a bench near the water, his hands shoved into his pockets. The sight of him, so alone and desolate, made Sarah's heart ache. She had always seen him as the strong one, the protector, the one who would always stand by her. But now, he seemed so small, so broken, like a man who had lost his way. She hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach him, but then she took a deep breath and walked toward him. Tom, she said softly, her voice trembling. You wanted to talk. Tom looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed, as though he hadn't slept in days. He nodded, but there was no warmth in his gaze. It was as if the person she had known and loved was no longer there. I don't know where to start, Tom said, his voice hoarse. Everything's falling apart, Sarah. And I don't know how to fix it. Sarah sat down beside him, her heart aching. I don't know how to fix it either, she whispered. But we have to try. Tom let out a shaky breath, running a hand through his hair. I never thought it would come to this. I never thought you'd cancel that dinner. It wasn't just about the dinner, was it? It was about everything. The years of silence, the tension between you and my mom, the way things never felt right with us. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to admit that it was happening. But now I don't know what to do. Sarah felt the sting of his words. It wasn't just the dinner that had caused all this. It was everything that had been building up over the years, the resentment, the unmet needs, the growing distance between them. She had tried to ignore it, tried to make things work, but now she realized that she couldn't keep pretending. I've been trying to make things work, Tom, she said, her voice shaking. I've tried so hard. But you've never really seen me. Not for who I am, not for what I need. You've always been so focused on your mother that I became invisible. Tom's face crumpled as though her words had hit him like a punch to the gut. I didn't mean for it to be like that. I didn't mean to make you feel invisible. I've always had this idea in my head of what a family should be, what it should look like. And I thought if I just kept everything together, kept everything in balance, that it would be okay. But it's not, Sarah. It's not okay. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, but she fought to keep them at bay. I need you, Tom. I need you to see me. I need you to choose me. I can't keep doing this alone. I can't keep fighting for us when it feels like I'm the only one who cares. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind rustled the leaves on the trees, and the sound of distant laughter from children playing in the park felt like it was coming from another world. Sarah could feel the weight of the silence between them, and it felt like it was suffocating her. I'm sorry, Tom finally whispered, his voice breaking. I didn't know. I didn't know how much you were hurting. Sarah's heart shattered at his words. The realization that he hadn't known, that he hadn't understood how deeply she had been suffering, made her feel more alone than ever. How could he not have seen it? How could he not have known that she was drowning, trying to keep their family afloat while everything around her crumbled? I don't know if we can fix this, Sarah said quietly, the tears now falling freely. But I need you to try. I need you to choose me, Tom. Because I don't know how much longer I can keep fighting for something that feels like it's already broken. Tom didn't answer immediately. He just sat there, staring at the ground, lost in thought. Sarah could see the conflict in his eyes. He was torn between his loyalty to his mother and his love for her. And in that moment, Sarah realized that the battle they were fighting wasn't just about dinner or family, it was about their entire future together. It was about whether they could rebuild what had been lost or whether it was too late. "I'll try, Sarah," Tom finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll try. But I don't know if I can fix this. I don't know if we can go back to what we had before." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that they could fix everything, that they could find their way back to each other. But she couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late. "You don't have to fix everything," she said softly, her voice trembling. "But you have to choose me. You have to choose our family. Otherwise, there's nothing left to fix." Tom nodded, his eyes filled with sorrow. "I'll try, Sarah. I will." The weeks that followed were a strange mix of hope and despair. Tom began making more of an effort, but the cracks in their relationship were still too deep to ignore. They tried to talk, to connect, but it was clear that something had shifted. The trust they had once shared was now frayed, and Sarah couldn't help but feel like they were both just going through the motions, waiting for the inevitable. Meanwhile, Sheila continued to play her games, manipulating Tom from the shadows, keeping him tethered to her. Sarah could feel the pull between them, the way Sheila's influence still loomed over every decision Tom made. It was like a dark cloud that wouldn't dissipate, no matter how hard they tried to move forward. And then, one day, Sarah received a call that changed everything. It was from a lawyer. Sheila had taken legal action. "Your mother-in-law is suing for custody of the children," the lawyer said, his voice cold and professional. Sarah's heart sank as the words hit her. She had known Sheila would retaliate, but she had never imagined it would come to this. A custody battle? Over her children? It was the ultimate betrayal. "I can't do this anymore," Sarah whispered to herself as the reality of it all set in. "I can't keep fighting this battle alone." The sound of the phone ringing echoed through Sarah's ears, each chime like a harbinger of impending doom. The lawyer's words replayed in her mind like a broken record: "Your mother-in-law is suing for custody of the children." Her body went cold at the thought. A shudder ran through her as she looked at the phone, still in her trembling hand. The weight of the words felt like a leaden weight in her chest, crushing every breath from her lungs. Custody of her children. Sheila had gone too far. Sarah had always known that Sheila would retaliate. She had always been a controlling presence in their lives, manipulating every situation to her advantage, but this? This was the breaking point. She couldn't fathom the depths to which Sheila had sunk. She had expected anger, maybe more subtle jabs or passive-aggressive comments, but she had never imagined that Sheila would drag their children into the middle of this mess. For a moment, Sarah just stood there, paralyzed. She had spent years trying to protect her family from Sheila's reach, but now it felt as though the woman had successfully broken through every defense. She had tried to push back, to stand up for herself, but the more she did, the more Sheila seemed to retaliate. And now, this. A full-blown custody battle. It wasn't just a threat, it was a war that Sheila had waged, and Sarah was about to find herself at the center of it. Sarah finally managed to pull herself together enough to respond. She set the phone down and stared at the empty space in front of her. She had hoped, no, prayed, that things would get better. That Tom would see the truth, that he would finally choose her, choose their family over his mother. But Sheila's power had always been too great, and Tom was still caught in the middle, unable or unwilling to choose. Sarah knew she couldn't just sit back and let this happen. She couldn't let Sheila tear apart everything she had worked for. She needed to act, and she needed to act fast. She couldn't fight this alone, though. She needed Tom. She needed him to finally make a decision. But after everything that had happened, after the tension and the silence between them, Sarah wasn't sure if he would be able to rise to the occasion. The confrontation. The moment Tom came home, Sarah was waiting for him. She had spent the entire afternoon pacing, trying to collect her thoughts and figure out what to say. She had to make him understand that this was it, the point of no return. If they didn't act now, if they didn't fight back against Sheila together, everything would fall apart. Her family would fall apart. When Tom walked through the door, he immediately saw the seriousness in her eyes. She could tell by the way he froze in the doorway that something had changed. For weeks, he had been avoiding the hard conversations, hoping that everything would somehow resolve itself on its own. But now, there was no more running from the truth. "Sarah," Tom's voice faltered as he stepped inside. He looked worn out, as though the weight of everything was finally starting to get to him. "What's going on?" Sarah didn't waste any time. She walked up to him, her fists clenched at her sides. "You need to sit down, Tom. We need to talk. About everything." Tom's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but he did as she asked, sitting down at the kitchen table. Sarah joined him, the tension between them palpable. She could feel the anger and frustration building inside her, but she knew she had to keep it together. This conversation could be the turning point. "Tom," Sarah said, her voice shaking with emotion, "Sheila is suing for custody of the kids." Tom's face went pale. He didn't respond immediately, just stared at her as if he couldn't quite process the words. His hand gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. "Are you serious?" Tom finally whispered, disbelief in his voice. "She can't do that." "Oh, she's doing it, Tom," Sarah replied, her voice steady now. "She's already filed the papers. And I need you to understand that this is not just about a dinner anymore. This is about our family. This is about our children. This is about everything we've built together." Tom's eyes shifted to the floor, and Sarah saw the internal struggle on his face. He was torn, she could see it, and that hurt more than anything. He had been avoiding this moment for so long, trying to keep the peace, but now, it was clear that peace was no longer an option. It was time to choose between his mother, who had controlled his life for so long, and the woman who had been standing beside him for years, trying to make their family work. "I don't know what to do, Sarah," Tom said, his voice trembling with helplessness. "She's my mother. I can't just turn my back on her. I can't just throw everything away because of one mistake." "Is this a mistake, Tom?" Sarah's voice rose, frustration bubbling over. "She's been controlling everything for years, manipulating you, tearing us apart, and you're still making excuses for her. What about us? What about our kids? What about our family?" Tom flinched as if her words had physically hurt him. He stood up abruptly, pacing the room as he struggled with his emotions. "I don't want to lose you, Sarah. I don't want to lose the kids. But my mother, she's the one who's always been there for me. She's the one who's always looked out for me." Sarah felt a coldness spread through her chest as she listened to him. The truth hit her like a slap in the face. Tom was still prioritizing his mother over their own family. He was still trapped in the same cycle of manipulation that Sheila had set for him so many years ago. And in that moment, Sarah realized that she couldn't wait for Tom to choose her anymore. He had made his choice. And it wasn't her. "I can't keep fighting this battle on my own, Tom," Sarah said quietly, her voice breaking. "I need you to step up. I need you to choose us. I can't do it anymore." Tom stopped in his tracks, his face a mixture of guilt and confusion. "I don't know how, Sarah. I don't know how to choose between you and my mother." "That's the problem, Tom," Sarah whispered. "You shouldn't have to choose. But you do. You've been letting her control everything, and I can't live in this family where I'm constantly fighting for a place. I've tried, but it's clear now. I can't fight her and keep our family intact. And I'm not going to let her take my children away from me." The finality in Sarah's words hit Tom like a wave. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The reality of the situation was finally sinking in, and Sarah could see the pain in his eyes. He had been living in denial for so long that he couldn't accept that his mother was capable of something this destructive. "I'll do whatever it takes," Tom said finally, his voice raw with emotion. "I'll fight for you, for the kids. I promise." But Sarah wasn't so sure anymore. She had heard those promises before, and they had never amounted to anything. The trust between them had been broken too many times, and she wasn't sure she could rebuild it again. "I need more than promises, Tom," Sarah said softly. "I need action. I need you to stand by me, not just with your words, but with your actions." The final showdown. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Sarah and Tom began to prepare for the legal battle that was looming over them, but the strain on their relationship only intensified. Every conversation felt like a negotiation. Every moment together was filled with tension and unresolved anger. Sheila's influence was everywhere, like a dark cloud hovering over their lives. The first court date arrived, and Sarah stood in front of the courthouse, her heart heavy with dread. She had never imagined that it would come to this, that she would be fighting her own mother-in-law for the custody of her children. But here she was, ready to do whatever it took to protect her family. Tom stood beside her, but even now, she could see the hesitation in his eyes. He was still torn between his loyalty to Sheila and his love for Sarah. And that was the crux of it all. Until he chose her, truly chose her, nothing would change. The damage was done, and the trust that had been broken couldn't be mended with promises alone. The courtroom was tense, with Sheila's lawyer on one side and Sarah's on the other. Sheila herself sat in the front row, her cold eyes fixed on Sarah. The woman was a force to be reckoned with, and Sarah knew that this would be the fight of her life. But she wasn't backing down. Not now. As the proceedings began, Sarah knew that this wasn't just a fight for her children. It was a fight for her life, her dignity, and her future. She had come too far to let Sheila destroy everything she had worked for. And when the judge finally made her ruling, Sarah realized that the battle was far from over.